It's Thursday, it's the 12th of June. I'm Moon Gun-young. This is ARIRANG News live from Seoul. Our top stories today. Cloudy prospects again. A matter of hours after being nominated as a new prime minister, former journalist and political novice Moon Chang-guk finds himself in hot water over controversial remarks regarding Korean history. And profitability among Korean exporters continues to worsen as export prices fall for the third month amid the local currency's record ascent against the U.S. dollar. And prepare for a joyous yet nerve-wracking football drama as World Cup 2014 kicks off in Brazil. And the Korean football team lands to a hero's welcome. We'll have those stories and more, and we will have this breaking news later for you. But the presidential office of Cheongwon has just announced its nominees for the prime minister's position. Actually, no, in fact, the presidential office aides, and we will have those for you in a little bit. But President Park Geun-hye's second pick to be her new prime minister has found himself embroiled in controversy, just like the president's first nominee did. And some controversial comments made by this political novice Moon Chang-guk a couple of years ago have surfaced and are casting doubts about his confirmation at Parliament. Here's our Choi Yoo-sun.
During a lecture at his church 3 years ago, Prime Minister nominee Moon Chang-guk said Japan's forced colonization of the Korean peninsula in the early 20th century was part of God's will to awaken the Korean people. He added that God also divided the two Koreas, saying that if the Korean peninsula had been an independent state at the time, the South would have settled on communism. At a lecture the following year, the nominee put his ultra-right views on display again, saying Korea was able to enjoy economic development by adopting technologies from Japan during the colonial era, and that it was a geopolitical blessing from God. Moon also denied that Korea's liberation from Japan was because of the people's independence movement, saying instead that liberation was granted to Koreans by the will of God. In response, ruling Saenuri Party floor leader Lee Wan-gu said he believes the comments were not ill-intended and that the nominee was trying to say that Korea as a nation should learn from past mistakes and move forward. The opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy had a decidedly different reaction. They called the nominee's comments anti-national and outrageous and said President Park should immediately withdraw his nomination and apologize to the public for another failed personnel appointment. Moon Chang-guk's representatives in a statement say the comments are being misinterpreted since broadcaster KBS has only aired portions of them. The presidential office, which is expected to announce a cabinet reshuffle and replacement of presidential secretaries this week, seems to be closely observing public response to the latest development. Choi Yoo-sun, ARIRANG News.
And a day after the floor leader of the ruling party gave a keynote speech to the National Assembly, it was the main opposition party's turn on this Thursday. Most of the focus was on the Sewol-ho ferry disaster and on ways to make sure a similar tragedy never happens again. Our Ji Myung-kil has more.
Addressing a full National Assembly on Thursday, Park Young-sun, floor leader of the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy, called once again for a thorough investigation into April's ferry disaster.
An investigation without boundaries is the order from the people. The very first task for the National Assembly in the second half of the year is to conduct a thorough probe into the Sewol-ho ferry tragedy.
Park made a case for comprehensive reforms in the government and parliament, saying failures in the government system were one of the causes of the accident. She also sounded the alarm about the nation's aging nuclear power plants.
A nuclear power plant disaster is like an atomic bomb. The nuclear industry has been tarnished with corruption scandals, which sets the stage for a major accident like the ferry disaster.
The main opposition floor leader called for anti-corruption bills targeting high-ranking government officials to be swiftly passed at the National Assembly. She said that Korea's bureaucrats have long enjoyed landing jobs after retirement at companies and public institutions, which has contributed to the lax management of safety regulations. Park also pledged that the main opposition alliance will make Korea a better place to live by reducing youth unemployment, household debt, and the growing social income gaps. Ji Myung-kil, ARIRANG News.
Well, Korea is pretty much paradise for smokers with its super cheap cigarette prices and lack of serious anti-smoking policies. But this might not be the case if the nation's health ministry gets its way. With hopes to cut the high smoking rate in Korea, the government is mulling over ways to make a pack of cigarettes a whole lot more expensive and much less attractive. Our Connie Kim has this story.
The Korean government is preparing new anti-smoking legislation to bring down the nation's high smoking rate. A European Union study last year found Korea's smoking rate at second highest among OECD members, barely trailing Greece. The Health Ministry said Thursday that it'll submit a revised bill to the National Assembly requiring tobacco companies put graphic health warnings on packs of cigarettes. Currently, written health warnings are only printed on the packs. Just a day earlier, the ministry said it'll push to raise taxes on cigarettes, taking in the World Health Organization's recommendations that urge members to raise cigarette taxes to 50%. The price of a pack of cigarettes in Korea has remained the same for 10 years or so at about $2.50, the lowest in the OECD. The ministry also plans to roll out new anti-smoking ad campaigns by the end of the month. The government has made a number of moves to reduce the number of smokers in the past, but they haven't been successful. Just 2 years ago, a bill that would have required graphic visual warnings about the health effects of smoking was opposed by the Economy and Finance Ministry due to concerns about falling revenue. As a recent report by the Korea Institute for Health and Social Affairs shows, Korea has a way to go in strengthening its anti-smoking policies. Out of 27 countries surveyed, Korea ranked 25th in terms of actively pursuing non-smoking policies. However, the health ministry is pushing hard to ensure graphic health warnings will be carried on cigarette packs before the year is out. More than 50 countries already have or are in the process of requiring picture warnings be printed on cigarette packs. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
Now, we have this news just coming in. The presidential office has announced its new picks for presidential secretaries. Now, President Park has named the current Gender Equality Minister Cho Yoon-sun as her new presidential secretary for state affairs. As for the presidential secretary for economy, An Jong-bum has been named presidential secretary for education and culture, Song Kwang-yong, and presidential secretary also. This is the first time for a female to be named as the presidential secretary of state affairs. One other person has been renamed, and we will have the latest for you in a later newscast.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Moon Gon-yong live from Seoul.
About shopping market. For the dual use of the Korean name East Sea and Japanese name Sea of Japan in school textbooks in the state of Virginia. As the Korean won continues to gain strength, the country's export prices fell to their lowest level in over 6 years in May. And this trend is likely to prevail for the time being, and our Yudian explains.
Korea's export price index fell for the third straight month in May to 86.8. That's the lowest level since December 2007. Export prices fell 1.6% from the previous month, which means exporters were earning that much less when shipping out the same amount of products. The drop is attributed to the strengthening Korean won. The won rose 2% against a greenback last month when Korea posted a sizable current account for the 26th straight month. Foreign stock investors also helped push the value of the won higher as they brought the Korean currency to buy local shares seen as safe investment. Experts say the won is expected to keep strengthening against the dollar in coming months, given that the United States has no plan to increase interest rates anytime soon. Even then, they don't see any major decline in the country's exports.
A growing number of exporters, particularly conglomerates, have grown largely immune to currency fluctuations. and research results since 2000 show that the country's exports are not negatively affected by exchange rate changes. So I don't see much immediate impact on exports from a stronger won.
Hall adds, however, it's a different story for export-dependent small to medium-sized companies whose profitability has worsened since the global financial crisis in 2008. That could signal a widening gap between mid-sized businesses and conglomerates. Yurian, ARIRANG News.
And amidst all this, Korea's central bank has left its key rate unchanged at 2.5% for the 13th straight month in June, as it believes the domestic economy is still not on track to a strong recovery. Following its monthly monetary policy meeting today, the Bank of Korea said slumping private consumption due to April's ferry disaster is slowing the pace of the nation's economic recovery. But the bank went on to say that exports did remain strong, with the global economy keeping up with its moderate pace of recovery. Governor Lee Ju-yeol had told reporters earlier on that a rate hike would only come after the economy is on path to a steady recovery, but ruled out the possibility of a rate cut. The country's inflation rate ran below the bank's target band for the 24th straight month in May, standing at 1.7%. Now, shifting our focus, North Korea and Japan have been cozying up of late, but the United States says Washington and Tokyo still agree on the fundamental importance of a nuclear-free North Korea. U.S. State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki says that the chief nuclear envoys from the two nations held very productive discussions this week in Washington on a wide range of issues related to North Korea. Now, she said the meetings reflected the close cooperation between the U.S. and Japan in denuclearizing Pyongyang in a peaceful manner. Psaki refrained from commenting on Japan's thawing ties with North Korea, but added Washington remains in close consultations with members of the six-party denuclearization talks. Now, across the world, for the second time in 2 days, Islamist militants have seized control of another Iraqi city. They're getting closer to the nation's capital of Baghdad, and the Iraqi government is now expressing its openness to have U.S. airstrikes help them hold back the insurgency. Here's our Kim Hyun-bin.
Islamist militants have claimed another city in Iraq, the second this week, one day after taking control of Iraq's second city of Mosul on Tuesday. Militants from the ISIL, an offshoot of al-Qaeda, overran the city of Tikrit, which lies just 150 kilometers north of Baghdad. And the militant group promises more attacks to come. In a 17-minute audio recording released Thursday, a spokesman for the ISIL threatens more fighting in Iraqi cities, including in the capital, Baghdad. Authorities have not been able to confirm the authenticity of the tape or when it was recorded. The turn of events represents a huge blow to Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki's attempt to fend back the insurgency, which has made massive strides since U.S. troops left the country last year. He also took aim at the security personnel who fled the city of Mosul instead of defending their posts.
I am saying this is a conspiracy because the numbers of al-Qaeda and ISIL forces could not have confronted the army and police forces that were located there. But what has happened? And how have the military units collapsed?
The U.S. has pledged appropriate assistance to help the Iraqi government and security forces. The New York Times on Wednesday reported that Prime Minister Maliki secretly asked the Obama administration to conduct airstrikes on al-Qaeda militant targets in Iraq.
We are working with Iraqi leaders from across the country to support a coordinated response. You can expect that we will provide additional assistance to the Iraqi government to combat the threat from.
During his trip to Greece on Tuesday, Iraqi Foreign Minister Hashar Zebari said his fellow leaders must unite to face a mortal threat. Zebari added that Baghdad will work with forces from Kurdistan to drive the fighters out of Mosul. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
Well, the long wait is nearly over for football fans all around the world. We're just hours away now from the start of the 2014 FIFA World Cup in Brazil. The protests and construction woes will be set aside for the next 4 weeks as the world shifts its collective attention to the football pitch. The first game features host country Brazil taking on Croatia in Group A action. The Korean squad arrived in Brazil on Wednesday to a crowd of cheering supporters who hope the team has found a way out of their ruts. The 23-man squad struggled to get the ball in the net during recent friendlies, but head coach Hong Myung-bo says his team had left their recent disappointments behind them and enters the World Cup with high hopes. Korea's first game against Russia is on June 17th at 7 a.m. Korea time. Now, the animal predictions for the Brazil World Cup, which kicks off Friday Korea time, have begun to challenge Paul the Octopus, who became a huge hit after his uncanny forecast during the 2010 World Cup. The host nation Brazil got a vote of confidence from its chosen turtle tipster. Son Jung-in has more.
A 25-year-old loggerhead turtle swims slowly across the pool. The male sea turtle named Big Head was given a choice between eating a fish hung from a Brazilian or Croatian flag, the two countries to play in the opening match. The turtle chose the host nation Brazil to beat Croatia. But will Big Head prove to be as credible as Paul the Octopus, who correctly guessed the results of 8 World Cup matches 4 years ago?
We held the event just for fun. We organized the event to raise awareness of the sea turtles that are on the brink of extinction.
Over in Peru, shamans held a ritual of their own with T-shirts of South American and European squads, brews, coca leaves, and skulls, wishing for strength, health, and determination of all football players. They reached out to ancient Inca gods for answers using pictures of famous soccer players like Brazil's Neymar and Argentina's Lionel Messi.
Brazil will be the one to raise the cup, but they will have difficulties along the way as they will face tough opponents.
The Peruvian shamans predicted that Brazil will meet Argentina in the final and asked all South Americans to root for their land until the end of the tournament. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
And now let's switch over for a look at the arts and culture scene. And for that, our Im Yoon-hee joins us live in the studio. And today, she brings us some information on an exhibition that might frighten some viewers, so beware. Good afternoon to you, Yoon-hee.
Good afternoon.
So tell us more about these passionate yet somewhat frightening pieces of artworks.
Right, so these are all done by artist Im Seung-chun. Now he has a solo exhibition open here in the city, but you know, artists really use their artwork to express themselves, but they also use it to send a message. And I think this artist has quite a bit to say. Take a look.
Silently, eerily these figures stand. This girl with a story to tell by her ragged clothing and blood dripping from her hand. But it's in her almost teary eyes and bitten lip that speak the hidden truth. The eyes are the gateway to the soul, but sometimes they can even betray the face. And what looks like a smile is just covering up true sorrow. It's a sea of two-faced souls. And it's in this sea that artist Im Seung-chun hides a message for his audience.
I like to comment on society through my artwork. My thoughts are combined with the lives of the people around us. I try to tell the story of these people through my works. When others see them, they can understand my message or even create their own.
In 2013, Im won the Seongguk Art Museum's Tomorrow's Artist competition, where he was recognized for his powerful works of art. He was awarded a solo exhibition by the museum, where he can feature his new 4-part exhibition called Omnibus. The exhibition includes various artworks that comment on the problems of modern society, including pieces that illustrate the dangers of today's social media, seen in his nocebo section. Nocebo represents the opposite of the placebo effect, and is something that Im feels illustrates today's social media culture, and how words spoken on the internet can damage the reality for many lives.
She looks like she's crying, but she's actually not, so it's a very awkward motion. Her hand covers her mouth because she says something that caused the other person to react and grow. Now he's scared of her words as he peeks through one eye.
Each creation of Im's has a strong message for his audience. They carry the themes of individuals trapped in a mechanistic society, in a lonely and harsh world.
Wow, very powerful art pieces there, and somewhat frightening. But more than that, I think it really relays or conveys a strong message. So the frightening part isn't as prominent like amongst us.
Exactly. So actually, being at the actual museum, the exhibition, is a little bit different. So when I was there, first of all, it's really quiet. It's a rather small museum and it's very quiet, and that really adds to the impact of all his works. And also a lot of his works, like the Two-Face you saw in the report, you could almost hear the different figures, the faces talking. And so although it's silent, the angry face, you can almost hear it screaming. This happy face, you can almost hear it, laughing. So it's a little bit creepy, but he also said all of his stories, where I noticed a lot of his works, they also have storylines with them, which was really interesting.
Right, like the Nocebo series, right? What I noticed, it all seems like the two characters, they have a conversation or a dialogue, a story between them.
So there is a story between the two. With most of his works, he does create a story. Now, this artist is very creative, like artists have to be. But it was interesting reading the story and then looking at his work. It kind of adds a different depth to each piece, and you kind of get a background information. But at the same time, the artist also told me that he wants people, the viewers and the audience, to create their own story by looking at his work.
Right. But also I hear that this museum, Seongguk Art Museum, is known for displaying more abstract art pieces, right?
Right. So this museum really likes to encourage abstract artists, and so a lot of their works, their exhibitions do feature abstract artists. But with this particular one, I felt myself very self-conscious while walking through the exhibition, which I think exactly what the artist wanted to do with his work. He wanted to inspire people to reflect upon themselves and upon society, and he really had a lot to say through his work.
On the surface, I think, on a lighter note, you can kind of say it's spooky and just right for tomorrow, Friday the 13th.
Right.
But I think it really conveys a stronger message inside, within, in depth about the problems in our society. So I think this is a very interesting artwork or art pieces to check out. All right, Uni, thank you so much for that, and we will see you next week.
I will see you next week.
Now, tornadoes and Korea are two words you would normally never hear in the same sentence, but you will now because a tornado was spotted in Korea earlier this week. News of this twister coupled with freak thunderstorms and torrential rain showers in recent days has people asking if it's all down to climate change. Here's our Shin Se-min.
The worst flooding in the Balkans in over a century. An unusually heavy hailstorm in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And exceptionally heavy snowstorms in the central United States. The effects of climate change are being seen across the globe through abnormal weather events, and Korea is no exception, as evidenced by the last few days. A tornado near Ilsan in Gyeonggi-do province this Tuesday was the first ever spotted on the mainland. The twister lasted for at least an hour, leaving a trail of destruction in its path, with at least 21 greenhouses destroyed. Tornadoes aside, other parts of the nation have had their own unique weather experiences this week, which include torrential rain and hail, both of which are unusual this time of year. Meteorologists say an unstable atmosphere is to blame. 5 kilometers above the nation, the air is currently at a temperature of -15 degrees. Early summer daytime conditions on the surface are generating rain clouds in the skies, leading to torrential rain and hail. For the immediate future, weather forecasts think there's no damaging storms this week. But climate experts worry that the recent events could be a sign of more worrying changes to come. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
So climate change is a culprit behind these freakish weather we've been seeing in Korea in recent days. Well, is there more to come? Let's turn to our Michelle Park. Michelle says, should we be bracing ourselves for more of those golf ball-sized hail or tornado for that matter?
Good afternoon. It's been a difficult week weather-wise with tornadoes and sudden showers. Now, the weather today looks gray here in the capital while it's already raining in some regions. Right now, rain is coming down hard at 30 millimeters per hour in the southern regions, which can expect thunder and lightning as well. Now, these unstable weather conditions are expected to continue until tomorrow before things clear up for the weekend, which will last until next week. Now, going over to our temperature readings, Seoul will top out at 26 this afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will peak up to 26 and 23 degrees. Now moving over to other regions, Jeju Island tops out at 23, Dokdo at 18, while Mount Kumgang tops out at 19. Well, that's all for now. Michelle Park, and back to you, Kanyang.
Well, thanks, Michelle, for that. And that's just about all from me at this hour. I'm Moon Kanyang. Check back with us at 4 p.m. Korea time for Business Today.